Okay. Are we going recording? Yes. So, all right. Good morning, everybody. I want to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Time now is 10:01 a.m. We are having this meeting in a hybrid format to allow for attendance, whether in person or virtually. Since the meeting is being recorded, we ask that one person speak at a time. And if you are speaking virtually, please mute yourself while others are talking. We also ask that you state your name upon speaking. We ask that one person speak at a time just to give consideration again for others. The agenda that we have listed on our website, so we'll go ahead and proceed through that. The first item on the agenda is the land acknowledgement, what I will read. The City of Seattle Public Safety Civil Service Commission acknowledges that we are on ancestral lands and waters of the Coast, Salish, and Duwamish people and their descendants. We honor with gratitude the land and the people past and also present. Next, we will also do commissioner introductions. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Quinaya Mays, and I am one of the commissioners.
Tom Applegate, commissioners. And my name is Richard Green. I'm one of the commissioners.
All right, perfect. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Can we proceed down the agenda with public comment? Any written or in person comment or general comment? Okay, so we will go ahead and continue. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the December 18th monthly meeting. I had a chance to review those and they look good. I don't have any questions or comments, any discussion around those meeting minutes.
I would move we approve the December 18th, 2025 minutes. Second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Great. Awesome. Do we need a executive session or anything like that later?
Yes.
Perfect. Next item on the agenda, let's move to updates and discussion, starting with the fire and police exam unit updates. So starting with police exams.
Right. Hello, I'm going to cover the police exams. You all know, but so for entry-level police officer, we ended the year with 4,538 applicants and then 1,441 candidates on the register. So those are both record numbers. Super excited about that. Yeah. And application and testing activity in January so far has been looking great. We already have 260 applicants. Wow. So, yeah. And then I'm going to do police sergeant on Rachel's behalf because she is facilitating an orientation session for her sergeant candidates. But we ended up with 73 applicants for that exam, which is kind of on par with what we've seen for the past few sergeants exams. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, Rachel is facilitating orientation sessions this week with those candidates.
So next item on the agenda, fire exams.
Good morning. I'm Yoshiko Grace Matsui. I'm one of the fire exams administrators, and I'll be talking about what we're up to in fire exams today. So it is kind of amazing to say that our oral board component of the entry-level firefighter testing process starts next week. We had over 3,900 applications. I'm going to say that if police beat us in 2025, that is really amazing. I think it's the first time since I've been here that entry-level police has had more candidates than firefighters. So congratulations to the folks who've been working on that. And I know that these departments are working very hard in that region. Well, that's very impressive. So of those like 3,900 applicants, the group that's moving forward are the top 1,500 people who scored the highest out of the people who completed the tests for Fire Team, which is a product with National Testing Network that we use, the PSCSC 1. And so of all the folks who passed those tests, took it, submitted scores to Seattle, we were only really able to do 1,500 oral boards And so we had to cap it. And this is the second year that we've had more candidates successfully complete the testing that we literally don't have space, time, and money to complete oral boards for every single one of them. And so we moved forward with the top 1,500 folks. I think, again, we had a very, very high registration rate. So folks in that test go online and actually select their own interview day and time electronically. And I think we have over 1,300 people signed up from the 1,500. So that's like a huge number. And some of you who may have been with us last year, maybe Adelaide, I don't know if Teresa recalls, or I know Andrea was with us a couple of days, and Sarah was with us a couple of days as well, helping us out. We actually had some days where there were no-shows, like that every single person made their appointment. And that also was amazing to me because I was like, I don't remember this ever happening either. So it takes quite a bit of effort and collaboration with the fire department to put on oral boards. We had training last week where we did 4-hour sessions where we talk about interrupting bias. We talk about the process of how oral boards work, where we are in the recruiting and hiring process. And then we do a deep dive on how to use the scoring rubric and training. And one of the things that I really like about those training dates is it's a combination of civilian and firefighters who come together and do those trainings together. So it gives them a chance to meet each other, gives the civilians a chance to hear more about the job, why they're a part of that process. And we, like I said, completed about 4 of those trainings. We actually have a makeup session tomorrow in the case that we need, that folks were on vacation during the very early January. So I anticipate that they'll be somewhere, I don't have the exact numbers, but we are ahead of the number of assessors that we had last year, which is very, very fortunate because those were some long days. Trying to wrap this up quickly, but we do 12 days. So we're doing oral boards from Wednesday to Saturday from January 21st to February 7th. And so we'll be hard to find because we'll be down at SeaTac at the Radisson Hotel. But we'll also be working, our staff will be working on Monday and Tuesday as well. So that could not be possible without the collaboration of the fire department, who does all the scheduling on the fire personnel side. And they support us the day of each and every day. And they basically run a mini staffing unit where if someone calls it sick, they try and find somebody to come in and take their spot. And it really is very time consuming and robust process, but we couldn't do it alone. So thank you to them, especially Anna Costin, Dory, Tyler, and folks like that. In the midst of all of that, we're doing a couple of small promotional exams called Battalion Chief, Fire Captain, and Fireboat Pilots. Applications closed back in December. So I think if I remember my numbers correctly, we had about 56 people apply for the captain's exam, 11 people apply for the battalion chief's exam, and 6 people apply for the pilot. All of those are in development at this time. And so the next steps for all 3 of those exams would be the written component, some of which are coming up very, very quickly. So for example, the battalion chief fire captain exam happens on the same day, and that's going to be February 21st. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I left anything out. I think I've covered most of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, fire and police staffing.
It looks like we have Ellen McKenzie joining us from the Seattle Police Department to provide that data. Mr. McKenzie, it looks like you're muted there. Oh, almost got you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Alan McKenzie from the Seattle Police Department. So we're into a new year. I've got some hiring numbers for January. So far, we've hired 8. I believe only 2 are separated. That's not an official number yet, but that's what I'm seeing. Don't have authorized budgeted pockets for the year of 2026 for you yet, or current staffing number. I apologize for that. I hope to have a more complete report for you next month.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, let's move on to the next item, which is Executive Director Budget Departmental Updates.
Do we have anyone from the Seattle Fire Department on?
We do not.
We do not, okay. And they did not send over that data, so maybe I can collect it from them and email you all.
Okay.
All right. Okay, thank you. Well, you know, the majority of our work at this time of year is firefighter oral boards, preparing for those. I was able to attend one of the trainings last week that Yoshiko, Evia, and Amy Jo put on, the anti-bias and scoring oral boards training, and it was really excellent. The team is working very hard, and we're backing them up as best we can. So that's really the main body of work to get through in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, you know, we are continuing to process our routine requests that we get from departments, from appellants. I'll give an update on specific appeals also, but the regular work we are beginning to think about our budget proposals for 2027 and getting introduced to those people in the mayor's office. We've got a lot of turnover, of course, in our administration. Oh, I apologize. I do not have a budget report in the materials today. The budget load has not occurred yet for 2026, but hopefully we'll be seeing that. It's possible we'll see it in February, but may not be till March that those numbers are loaded into our budget systems. But it's the same budget that I reported towards the end of 2025. Okay. And I'll jump right into the case status reports, which start on page 7 of your materials. The commission does have 2 disciplinary appeals before it at the moment. Officer Rigone, we conducted a pre-hearing conference. That's Officer Rigone versus Seattle Police Department. Conducted a pre-hearing conference in that matter last Thursday. And we are putting together the order and will be reaching out to commissioners to schedule a disciplinary appeal for Officer Rigone. The parties agreed, and I agree with them, that I estimate 3 days will be necessary for that appeal. It was a separation. You all are well aware of Officer Hill's appeal heading up to begin on February 9th. The materials in that case, pre-hearing materials, will begin to be due next week. And I believe Teresa is scheduling a session, reaching out to you. I'll schedule a session to prepare for that disciplinary appeal hearing. We do have another appeal that was filed by Captain Doug Johnson regarding a decision by commission staff, and that one is under review at the moment. It will be on your case status report in February. I think that's very likely. And that is the case status report. The following pages, we are pretty much blank for request for reinstatement, request for probationary extension, because at the time of publication of these materials, we had not processed any, but I believe we have 1 or 2 now, so you'll see those in the February report.
Thank you, Ms. Julie, appreciate it. The next item on the agenda are action items. So let's go ahead and move forward with action items. The first one, it looks like proposed rulemaking, so rule 9.3, e-copy inspection examination protest review.
Yes, thank you. We do have a staff presentation, so give me just a moment to get that up on the screen. And the way this is laid out in the agenda is that we have a brief introduction and presentation about the purpose and proposed changes. And then, as we typically do for rulemaking, we'll have an open public comment session. And then commission can do an executive session if needed, or move right into discussion and action if they so choose. And Gary Smith is here to support y'all's legal needs. So get this presentation up. Thank you for your patience. All right. Well, it's been about a year, I think, since the commission did a rulemaking. So I'm going to start I do have this presentation, but I'm also going to start in your meeting materials at page 10. With the Seattle Municipal Code, I'll talk about the commission's authority to rulemaking under 4.08070, the Public Safety Civil Service Commission, the City Council delegated to the commission rulemaking power. So you'll find that rule there. We also act, and this is not in your materials, but is available publicly. We act in accordance with the Seattle Municipal Code for rulemaking, and I believe that is Seattle Municipal Code 3.02. To proceed in your materials, at page 12, we are required by the code to publish proposed changes to the commission rules, and here are the documents that show us doing so on pages 12 and 13. More than 14 days in advance of today's meeting, which is the first date you could take action or you might have taken action. We also publish the proposed rule on our website in the current proposed changes version, current rule version, proposed changes version, and proposed changes accepted version, which you'll also find in your written materials at pages 15 through 21. All right, now I'll turn to the presentation that you see on your screen. And I'm going to hand this part over to Sarah Butler. But feel free to ask us questions. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of why this is necessary, the promotional exam scoring process, and the proposed changes. I'll just say one thing about what prompted this proposal was that we received requests from 2 promotional candidates for the Seattle Fire Lieutenant exam. Those 2 folks took the exam and received their scores and asked if they could appeal those scores to me. I did tell them that those scores were not appealable. That was not the practice of the commission or how the rule had been interpreted. But it brought to our attention, and the additional context is that you all, the commission updated this rule in 2024 as well. It brought to our attention that there were perhaps multiple ways to read the rule. And so we wanted to suggest the commission amend the rules to bring them in line with our current and historical practice. Now I'll hand it over to you, Sarah Butler, our Policy and Operations Advisor.
Thank you. All right, so before going into more of the rule itself, talk about a little more detail of the rulemaking process, as Andrea started. So we always circulate proposed revisions internally and with our stakeholders, so shared with both public safety departments and public safety unions. We have posted the proposed revisions and invited public comment in accordance with 3.02. We placed it on our website, sent it out via our email subscriber list, newspaper of record, and all the dates are here. We received one written public comment ahead of this meeting, and then we will accept any additional public comments that may come forward during this meeting. And then once we finish reviewing this, it's up to the commission for their consideration. We'll vote. Next slide. So for a little background, one of the commission's core functions, as you know, and as required by state law, is to administer exams that assess their relative knowledge, skills, and abilities to perform. The purpose of this is to ensure that hires are competent to provide critical public safety services and to guard against political pressures in public safety hiring. This process also creates transparency and fairness for applicants who are competing for employment opportunities. So it is the rule that establishes policies for administrating exams is 909 and 9.23 and 9.24 direct the process by which employees may seek recourse on promotional exams. 9.23 is the key inspection and examination and review, and 9.24 is correction of clerical errors. And these were taken from the model rules in 1978. Next slide. 9.23 was last revised at the end of 2023 and added a standard of review, and it did include some more clarifying language, protests, and review processes. We have lived with that rule for a little bit over a year and identified some additional areas of improvement that would be helpful. Since the inception of the rule in 1978, protests and reviews have been limited to exam content and occasionally administration issues. Examinees file a protest before the scoring happens. Rulings apply to all test takers. Entire exam, they don't benefit just the candidate that's bringing forth the appeal. And the commission has not rescored or regraded exams. That's been historical practice. So I'll talk a little bit about the exam scoring process, then I'd invite many of our examiners in the room to chime in if they've got anything to add. Exams are scored by assessors who are chosen based on their experience at or above the rank that is being tested. They receive extensive training on the consistent use of scoring prior to the administration of the exam. Once applicants take their exam, each assessor independently scores how their performance was done. And then they all meet to discuss and finalize scores using their established criteria. So there's sort of this calibration process. All candidates are evaluated by the same group of assessors for each exercise.
Is there anything, Yoshiko, that you would add to that? Or Emily?
We typically, or it has been our longstanding practice, Grace Matsui, that we have assessors who are from outside of our own department. And so they are impartial. They should not have any deep connection or knowledge about the candidates who are taking. We have them review the names of the candidates who are testing with them, and they have to sign a release that says they don't know any of these folks or are not related to any of these folks. And we also do an in-depth training before assessment starts of 1 full day of training, which includes some anti-bias, introduction to the department, any sort of policies that they might be unfamiliar with, that they might encounter. So that is definitely part of the training. We go over the scoring rubric in depth, and then we do mock oral boards to practice with members from the development committee so that they get comfortable using that rubric before the first candidate steps in the room.
And that also gives the assessors the opportunity to ask committee members questions directly about, policies at SMD or SPD and things that they should be considering.
Thank you. So next slide. So without going into deep into the language now, this is just sort of proposed revisions to 9.23 and 9.24 at a high level. First is to use cleaner language to describe the process of correcting wrongs of the test itself. The second is reorganizing the language and concepts to be more logical and removing redundancies. And the third is to clearly state that exam scores themselves cannot be reviewed or changed by the Public Safety Social Service Commission, although exam staff will continue to receive and correct miscalculations or corrective errors. And these revisions are not a change in practice, but they're described.
Any questions?
Sarah, you mentioned that, I don't want to misquote you here, but basically that past practices don't review scoring. And has anyone ever appealed scoring to your knowledge?
Not to, this is Andrea, I'll answer, not to our knowledge. And Rachel Sade, has been doing this job more than almost 30 years. Yoshiko's been doing this how many years?
9.
So I've asked Rachel to see if she can come down and join us. She's just down the hall. Adelaide, would you?
Yeah, I
Right,
think we can.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Mike. So I think she can speak, firsthand to that question. And I think we're gonna get some public comment also from former Commissioner Nark, who can answer that question as well. I can tell you that no one has, until this year, until firefighter Christensen and firefighter Hewitt asked to appeal their earned scores, which we didn't evaluate for, we didn't evaluate them for timeliness because the jurisdiction, I said, there's no jurisdiction to appeal these. It's not something that can be appealed to the commission. But I never saw it since the beginning of my time as executive director. So that goes back 6 years. Yoshiko, have you ever seen it?
Not in my firsthand experience, but Rachel has more examples. But the timeline for appealing or contesting your earned score would not be until the register is published. Candidates do not get their full score, until the day the register is published. So they don't know what their score is. They might know the raw score that they got on the written exam component, but they are not given any information about their oral board performance in these types of oral boards until the day of the register is published. And then according to the rules, there's an extremely tight window that folks can contest. It's like 3 days only. So no, I have not seen it.
But to your knowledge, no one has actually appealed, and we've never actually processed an appeal to establish like this probably is the right word, but formal.
That's not what it's, I think people have done it, but it hasn't been in my experience. So I'm glad Rachel is.
Okay.
You want to repeat the question for us?
So the earned scores, has anyone ever appealed to the commission their earned scores and the commission taken up the question?
Yeah, that 2, 3.
Never, not in my 30 years. So what has occurred, we had one incident that I can recall about, I don't know, 20 years ago. We're in a captain's exam, a little less than that, a police captain's exam. We had a writing exercise scenario. And the candidates were instructed that they could, they had to write on this particular topic, and they were to produce a maximum of 3 pages in response to the exercise. We had one candidate who quite impressively typed 10 pages during the 2 hours. And so when we were scoring the document, we, in compliance with what we had, the instructions we had given to all the candidates, only scored the first 3 pages. And did not score the remainder because, we had to be equitable, and we had very clearly in bold instructed the candidates to only produce 3 pages.
And was that in the exam protest? Was that sorry, I'm getting the words wrong.
The protest period for, yes, protest period for the assessment exercises.
Right, so that was post-exam, not post-register.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, so that abides with your earlier statement that it
Yes.
did not happen. That's an
No.
exam protest.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did not make that distinction, but that was during the protest period that they were upset that they were only the first 3 pages were being scored.
And that one did go to the commission, right?
It did go to the commission, and the commission ruled with the development committee in terms of how it was scored.
So they scored the first 3 pages. But that was an exam protest. to the development committee that then would have the decision. So this is not the scenario that I think, is it correct? That's not the scenario you're at.
Seemed a little different, yeah.
They do not protest that. In my 30 years, we've never had anyone say, you know, I don't like my score and with the condition please rescore my exam.
Okay.
That's never happened.
Okay,
Ever.
that's really helpful.
This is Commissioner Mays. I have a question. So you only scored the first 3 pages. Was that communicated that the key was we are only scoring the first 3 pages?
We only said 3 pages, and so we weren't going to, you know, randomly select 3 pages that we thought, you know, we just scored the first 3, and anything done in excess of those 3 pages were, yeah.
It was
done
in the
to
instructions.
handle that.
That was
It was in the instructions, it was in the candidate instructions.
But did it say we are only scoring the first 3, meaning if you do 20 pages, then anything after 3, we wouldn't score?
That was all communicated in the instructions. Yeah, but the candidate just read over that.
And that's not the present appeal, that's like old.
That was, I want to say 2009, so. Police captain's exam. But that is the only protest to scoring, but it was with regard to methodology, not the score itself that was achieved. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I have a follow-up. Have we looked at data like how other jurisdictions handle this, whether it's the scoring or just anything around outside of the city?
Yeah, best practice really is about what we're concerned about, and what we're here for is to ensure that everyone, the process is highly structured and that everyone is given an equal opportunity to do his or her best, and that the same parameters are there for how all candidate performances or papers are scored. So to that end, we have a highly structured process that we go through, such that when our assessors come from out of town, best practice is to get those folks who are people who serve at the rank or the rank higher to come from other agencies that have done that work and are experienced to do the scoring. We still spend an entire day with them going over the scoring criteria and how to use that scoring criteria in an equitable fashion and in compliance with what the test is looking for to assess the knowledge, skills, and abilities. So it's extensive training that is required. And the individuals that we bring, they're not lay persons. Like I said, they have experience in the rank. So we have a kind of a two-for there, and that is the structure that we have for doing. We don't have a mechanism by which people outside of those trained people, everyone goes through the process the same way, in the same, you do orientation, you do your prep period, you do your interviews, all the candidates are put through in the same exact cycle, they're the same manner. And our assessors are trained very specifically to assess those exercises in a highly structured, methodical way. And in a very thoughtful way. We're very careful about the people that we get from other agencies to come here and do that work for us. And so anything outside of that arrangement would be not without the benefit of that kind of training and that kind of consistent structure being maintained, which we're all in the room when assessors are doing their work. So we make sure that everything remains in compliance.
Thank you. Commissioner Mays, I did some research, other jurisdictions in Washington, and found that our practice and application of the rules is consistent with both large and small jurisdictions in Washington. It is standard in Washington, and I actually consulted with some colleagues in Spokane that they have an even shorter appeal exam protest review period than we do. They require people to file protests before they leave the testing facility. And they can only protest the content of the exam. So well before scoring has occurred. And that's consistent across Washington. They also, like Seattle, the remedy is usually to, one, accept an additional answer as correct. So I think both A and B could be correct in this scenario. Please accept that answer. To revise the scoring key or throw out an item because it was just too confusing or otherwise, not fairly answerable by the entire group. I think the biggest consistency that I see across is short appeal windows well before scoring, for the purpose that if you make a change to the exam, it needs to be to the entire exam so that it's applicable to all candidates. To highlight what Rachel was saying, consistency for test takers is key. And if you were to rescore even one exercise for 1 or 2 or 10 candidates, those folks are getting a different scoring rubric essentially than all of the other candidates. It's really, this is only one of many reasons why I think continuing with the current practice is advisable, but it's really a slippery slope. The purpose of the civil service system, of course, is to provide fair opportunity, and it would be fundamentally unfair to let 1 or 2 candidates. Like it's understandable why people would ask, but it would affect the entire system.
I suppose that the question that comes up in my mind is we're not changing this grading rubric. Theoretically, if someone's asking to be rescored, we're not saying here's a new rubric. We're saying this person is saying, hey, I think that based on this rubric, that this group who evaluated missed some of the things here. And I don't think that this score is consistent with my performance. And I'd like someone to make sure that these scores abided by the rubric. And I understand that there's 3 graders and that so on and so forth, but I think that's what these folks are asking, because they're not asking for a new grading key. They're asking for someone to make sure that this was done accurately.
Well, they're asking for a different person to be asked that it's done accurately. And how I don't see a way that we could create the same conditions that the commission, that even you 3, even if you receive the same training, could apply the same criteria that those folks who scored the other 90 candidates.
So do you have any process in place to make sure that these out-of-town graders who've got 1 day of training are making that everything is done consistently and that they didn't miss anything?
Well, that's our exam supposed to speak to that.
The process, even though it's only 1 day, is very extensive. Not only do we go over all of the ground rules for everything that applies to all of the exercises that assessors have to keep in mind, but then there's detailed instruction for the scoring of each of the individual exercises, followed thereafter by mock orals. And what that is individuals who were members of the development committee pretend that they they are candidates. And, we tell them on purpose, you have to approach this as not someone, that has the knowledge of the testing process, but, a general medium kind of response so that, and there are multiple mock orals so that assessors then get a chance to score those mock orals and to become comfortable with the scoring rubric and to apply it consistently. It's also an opportunity in which the assessors get to ask questions about, okay, so in your department, if a candidate says this, what does that mean? Is it appropriate for these resources to be used in this particular setting? What is the norm? If they have any questions that are not covered in the training or precisely in the scoring rubric. So there's opportunity for clarity. It's a long day, and we make sure that before the assessors leave, everyone is comfortable.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add that the folks who are the assessors for the fire lieutenant exam are people from other jurisdictions who have worked or at a fire lieutenant rank or higher. So they are the subject matter experts where there's really no substitution for that experience.
And, I'm not, trying to, I understand that, people, sometimes are unhappy with their scores. These are individuals who are applying for these positions and they don't necessarily have, depending, to what degree they prepare themselves, all of the relevant criteria for what it takes to fulfill that position. So, you know, I stress this because we really do want to have qualified people in these positions. And it's important that those that are assessing the responses and the behavior of candidates, not behavior, but responses, you know, the content will properly assess from their standpoint as individuals who A, have been trained in the exercises, but B, who have fulfilled these responsibilities for, in a lot of cases, many years. So they know what the job entails. So it's individuals, you know, occasionally we do have folks who are very disappointed. It is disappointing to put energy and effort into a test. A lot of times it's been my experience that individuals have not passed the test. And then we ask people, you know, come on in, take a look at your performance. In the case of Fire Lieutenant, Lee Sergeant, they're both done the same way. You know, have the scoring matrix there, take a look at what you said and did. It's not atypical for people who are like hugely disappointed to, you know, give themselves higher marks because they really want to have, you know, a place on the eligibility register, but the expertise of the assessors cannot be disregarded because someone is disappointed, if that makes sense. That expertise and the scoring matrix, which I have to say, the scoring matrix is not random. That is material that's put together very carefully over a period of months by individuals who, you know, members of the development committee are members of the Seattle Fire Department. Or in my case, on our side, Seattle Police Department, who did very specific and relevant things as far as the criteria to be used for assessing the knowledge, skills, and abilities that each candidate has to do the job. So both of those things have to be considered. So I understand, you know, disappointment. You know, we want to help people to do better too. But having exams scored and rescored by individuals who, you know, A, weren't trained to do that, and B, have not filled those positions, creates an inequity for the entire group. And that would be very, as you know, Andrea referred to slippery slope. It really would.
Well, thank you for your comments, but my big concern here is we're being asked to change rules. And so I'm trying to explore the impact of that, where that comes from, how this is all done. I think this opens up sort of broader conversations on the process as well.
I don't think the rule is really changed. I think the language is being revised to try to improve the clarity, because obviously there was a misunderstanding on the part of these candidates in terms of what the rule meant. So I think, I mean, in my 30 years, I can tell you how it's been interpreted and used.
Sure.
Unfortunately, these candidates interpreted it differently, and I think the rule revision is an attempt to try and help everyone have clarity about, you know, what you are able to protest or appeal.
So just to read out loud, the part that we're talking about here, 9.23D says, any protest against scoring, or, I think it's a very key or any allegation of clerical error in the final results of the examination must be filed within 3 days of notice of results. So any protest against scoring, and I realize that has not been, internally, the thought was that was never intended to protest scoring. However, that's pretty black and white, at least in my mind.
What it referred to.
And so I guess what I'm saying now, we're being asked to eliminate that out of the rules. And so that's why I'm trying to really get into, we're being asked to eliminate this language out. They're striking this from the rules.
How this has always been interpreted and used is like the situation that I recounted to you in the police captain's exam. How did you score this paper?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, but what I guess where I'm coming from is that I'm being asked to strike this language from the rules and update it to say that there is absolutely unequivocally no way that you can protest scoring. So I'm trying to, that's where these questions are coming from.
Yeah. I think your words are correct. But, you know, Rachel's describing the practice. And so I tell you honestly, I do not believe that this proposal constitutes a change. I think it is a clarification to help candidates, the public, us understand what the practice and application has been by the commission. And I think we do have an additional public commenter who might be helpful on this issue if we're ready, if the commission is ready for
I'm
that.
not ready quite yet.
Okay.
But practice and application has never been, we've never done that, right? If there's never been an appeal, but it doesn't an appeal constitute practice and application?
I'll let, I might have more to say, but I am interested in hearing what former Commissioner Rack has to say.
Okay, well, it's the other parts of this testing process that this rule change has brought up for me that I'd like to discuss and figure out is, one of the other goals is to eliminate bias. However, this test, my understanding is we video record it and then we have the assessors watch the video. Is that accurate?
I'm really glad you brought up the recording piece of it. We did not start recording assessments for fire lieutenant and police sergeant until the mid 2000s. And that was due to a cheating scandal that happened. And so we had to change our practices to get the testing all done in one day. That's all up until that time. And for the other ranks, those are in-person interviews that are being done. So the creation of a process by which we could test everyone in one day was not intended to create an additional right to say, okay, here's my recorded test, and I want you to rescore it because I'm unhappy with the score that I received for 5 others. So the other, that would be it creating something that was different for the in-person folks, so police lieutenant and police captain and fire captain and fire battalion chief, because that isn't something, there's no method by which to go back and have someone review that. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it wasn't intended to create a new opportunity for somebody to go back and get their exam scored.
Sure.
It was only for exam security purposes. Does that make sense?
I have a follow-up question to that. So as you are going through like the mock boards and you're practicing within this training, and then you mentioned going through like the anti-bias training as well during that one-day training, does it hit on any pieces around like the various communication styles, the various learning styles, the various comprehension levels when it comes to anti-bias? Because what I'm thinking about is from an HR perspective, sometimes anti-bias is just the starting point, but there's multiple levels outside of just the phrase anti-bias. There's racial equity, there's social justice, there's cultures, there are different things that come around that. So thinking about the various communication styles, various learning styles, various comprehension levels that tie into a person's unique experience. How do we look at those included in this process?
There is a section of the training that relates to, common errors and those things that come into play. And those items are actually covered as part of the training. Not to the extent of what we would do in a 2-day kind of, it's not extended, but it is part of the training. Absolutely. And our exams are primarily focused on determining, a candidate's knowledge, skills, and abilities based on the content of what it is that they say. It's not how they say it necessarily, but we also are very, very particular when it comes to our panels. We make sure that we have a very, very diverse set of individuals who are coming here. So that is extremely important to us to have diverse panels and have that training as part of the knowledge that assessors have to have that when they're assessing candidate performances.
I just wanted to add one more piece of context. I think one of the reasons that we saw appeals from in 2025 on the fire lieutenant exam is, I'm sure you recall, the commission a short time ago instituted or eliminated the, they modified the rule that allows there to be a minimum passing score for firefighter oral boards for promotional exams. And so this was, and Yoshiko can probably speak to this. I'll hand it over to you. Go ahead, please speak to it.
Yes. And that rule, that exception to have there not be any sort of passing score was on the books for something like 30 some years. And so this is the first promotional exam on the fire side for lieutenant, captain, or battalion chief that had a minimum passing requirement. We knew and anticipated that there would be many people who either even didn't realize that they would potentially fail, or they would really be shocked by not meeting a minimum standard. Because for 30 years, no matter what you said and did in an oral board, you would end up on the list. You could walk in and say, I like long walks on the beach and sunsets, and they would score you. That would be added to your written score, and you would be put on the list, and you would almost be guaranteed a promotion no matter how well you did. And so we looked at making that score update, one, because it was an outlier for any other things that were happening on the police side, and also for fireboat pilot, fireboat engineer, which absolutely have minimum scores. But because it really came towards, are we guaranteeing and ensuring that people had a minimum level of competence to take on that promotional rank? And if you could go into your oral board and just fail it, are you really having folks who are the most prepared be the ones who go on to be promoted? This was a proposal that was supported by the fire chief, by the other members. I think we had affinity groups come in and speak to this when they also changed and helped change the proposal of the split between the weight of the written exam. Oral board used to be 60-40, and now it's 50-50. And so really I view that language of implementing a minimum passing score as correcting something that was troublesome and concerning for the last 30 years. And as someone who's been a proctor in the room, before I came to work here, I was a proctor in the room for oral boards. So for 13 years, I watched folks come in and I was like, okay, interesting. And when I would tell assessors prior to this last year that it didn't matter what they said or did, when candidates came in, they could still get a job. Some of our assessors were actually shocked. They were like, well, why are we here? Like, if they can just come in and just pass and get a job, it doesn't really matter how well they do or if they show any level of confidence. So to me, it is a major change in the mindset of how to study, how to prepare, and also understanding that it may not be the time or your preparation or your experience or the way that you presented your experience did not meet that minimum competence level. And I encourage folks to go back, try again next year.
You mean 2 years?
Yeah.
So I want to be clear, it's a 2-year timeline on this. So if you do not meet that minimum passing score, your job, you do not have an opportunity to promote in your profession for 2 years.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the reasons getting this right is so important.
And I hope that the folks that do not pass really have the opportunity to gain some new skills, maybe have better study approaches, maybe it's understanding the mechanics of the test a little bit better so that they adequately.
So they have 2 years, there's a 2 year that you have to wait to kind of circle back around to this. Within that 2 years, what is being done? So if they have to wait 2 years, I'm assuming they're going back to restudy, they're going back to review something to improve, their test taking capabilities, whatever it is. Is there guidance that we usually give to say, hey, this is what you should be working on for the next 2 years, or something that kind of meets them halfway to know what to do next, so that when that 2 year mark is up, then they've progressed and changed a few things to be able to be ready?
That is one of the parts of this job that I found challenging when I came on board. Is we are not like teachers or mentors, we're examiners. And so coaching folks for their performance is really not part of our role. I do hope that the department can help with those sort of things, and there are lots of resources online. One of our assessors, not assessors, but development committee members for entry-level oral boards actually runs a company teaching people how to do oral boards. Like, came in and like did some excellent mock training, and he was like, "This is how I teach people to do oral boards." So there are a ton of resources out there. I know that most of them are going to be under the umbrella of either training that the fire department provides or outside resources that folks get. I know that there are study groups that people form individually. I know folks from higher ranks mentor and have study groups, you know, that they even do at home. You can certainly pay a company for preparation, but no, we don't provide individual feedback or tips, except for what we do for everyone. Like we will give a workshop on suggestions, but yeah, it's up to them to apply what they've learned and figure out how they can improve. Thank you.
I had a question. So on these oral examinations, how many assessors are there reviewing one thing?
Sure, absolutely. So for lieutenant and, well, actually, we'll just talk about fire lieutenant. We have two boards. So we call it board A and board B, and they're both 20 minutes long. And so we try and pack in as many things as possible, but the basic evaluation for the rank, the promotional rank, is going to be 40 minutes. So you get a preparation period, like Rachel said, where you say, here's the packet of material that you'll be evaluated on and the materials that you can use to organize your thoughts. And we typically give about a 1 hour preparation period. So they'll get a packet, it's about 15 pages long, that says, here's what you'll be asked in board A. It might include these components. Here's the information that we give about it. Here's what's going to happen in board B. Use your notes for this, and they get an hour to lay out an outline, bullet points. They might write down policies they want to reference, whatever, however they want to organize that. They could even outline their answer, their entire script. And then they take that information with them into the oral boards. For a lieutenant, they're working directly with a proctor. So if Adelaide is a proctor, the proctor is going to pick them up, take them into a room, sit them down in front of a video recorder, and they'll read the questions and do the timekeeping, and they'll give the presentation directly to the camera. So then several weeks later, we bring in our assessors from out of town, and 3 people are assigned to each board. So we have 6 assessors, 3 for board A and 3 for board B.
Okay, and so how is your final score determined from essentially six assessors?
Oh, right, yes. So our score sheets, might have 8 ratings, and they go from 1 to 9. And maybe B has 8 ratings, and they go from 1 to 9. There is that calibration time. We have very strict rules that if you give someone a 7 and I want to give them a 2, they really cannot do that. The assessors need to stop and say what happened, and they need to either come together because they may have not heard something that the candidate says, but they're required to stop and go, okay, let's calibrate, make sure within 2 points of each other. And then we average those scores for all of those ratings and add them together.
So is it one group is 3 and another group of 3, or all 6?
No, they don't talk to each other. In fact, we encourage them not to talk to each other at all around assessing candidates, because we don't want you to come in and say, oh my gosh, Sarah did terrible, and they haven't gone to the assessor board B yet at lunch. We're talking about lunch.
It's different content, right?
Yeah, and it's all a different content.
A and B are different exercises.
Okay.
Yeah.
The set of 3 assesses every candidate. The set of 3 assessors assesses every candidate for board A. So they sit down and they watch a lot of videos.
Something videos. Yeah.
And those 3 assessors, what? Back to your example, one assessor says that it's a 2, another says it's a 7. Do the assessors then talk to each other?
They have to.
Okay, and they eventually come up with about 3 scores, I suppose. But
They do.
they're supposedly should be somewhat consistent, right?
Oh, it absolutely has to be consistent. Otherwise, they're not following the rubric.
Okay.
So we allow some variance, but no, we want I would, at that point, the exams analyst would say, what is happening and let me help you figure it out.
And
Because
of
we
those,
need to come
of
to a
those three scores, you just averaged the,
And we average.
okay.
And our vendor also does analyses on the reliability and consistency between the raters over the entire process. So that would flag any potential issues if like systemically one rater was going really low or really high compared to the other two. Yeah, so that's also something that's looked at.
Yeah, and we found for years and years and years, the statistics show us that someone's performance on A correlates very high to what they do on B, which correlates very high to how they do on the written exam. It's pretty consistent, like, and so when you look at like, oh, if there are differences in strengths and weaknesses of someone who does better reading or presenting, those scores actually, how do you do regardless of the format, are pretty close. Like people who do well on the written exam tend to do well on the oral exams.
It just seems to me that if there are three, you're going to eliminate any sort of a fair amount of any potential bias or
Right.
in those scores. I would think.
Yes.
You've got three people doing it.
But I think one of the things that, listen to what you were saying, going back to the minimum passing score, that was brought on by the fire department last year to update that rule, which I think was a good update. But my understanding is that in the past, up until the last two, maybe three lists, is that, we rank these down to the, I think, hundredth of a point, thousandths of a point. What's our grading?
It's thousands.
Thousands. So down to the thousandths of the point. Well, the history that I understand is that you would have to, out of the 50 to 60 names, let's say on the lieutenant register, they were only going to hire 5 to 20 of those. So if you wanted a job, that was highly competitive. People spent 500 to 1,000 hours studying to be in that top 10, 15, whatever it is to attain that job. Other folks who are down at the bottom, they would raise their hand and say, yeah, I didn't study. I'm doing this because it's this very strange process. I'm not aware of any other application process that's kind of like this other than the fire department or public safety. And so they go, well, I'll just go through the process so that way I understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
And their name would be number 40 on the register with a 20%. But they weren't even in their mind, they weren't gonna take the job. They're just doing that to understand it. So it wasn't until the last 2 or 3 lists that they're now exhausting the list, which is my understanding a pretty unique thing to exhaust it. And that's when it's like, whoa, now we're exhausting the list. We need to have a minimum. This was never intended to have no minimum. And that's sort of some of the driver.
I'd have to look to verify how long it's been since we didn't exhaust a lieutenant's list. We usually go pretty deep, like you're saying. So if we don't hire everybody who's on that list, it's pretty deep, like maybe 40 out of 45. So if you made it on the list, whether you studied or not, you might potentially get a job. So folks were going through and getting promoted if they are at like, hey, I'm going to sign up for the first time just for practice, see how it goes, which is in fact, although it's time consuming for us, I think is a great way to get exposure to this process. And I encourage people to go through to try it out and see what they can do to improve for next time. We cannot account for how many vacancies there are in the fire department at any given time. We do the test every 2 years, whether there's 1 vacancy, 0 vacancies, or 50 vacancies. So to me, whether or not you accidentally got a job because there just seemed to be a high number of vacancies, I think our goal as an agency is to make sure that folks who are promoted are competent to take that next step. And this is one way that we're ensuring that.
I think, I could tell you I've been in a little over 9 years, and at least the first 1 or 2 lists that I was aware of, it was not 40 out of 45. They had at least 20 people behind them. And so I just want to share my experience. The other thing that really weighs heavily on me when I'm trying to make a decision on whether to update this rule is that I think it's going to twofold. One is a lot of the people that are on this list, from the day that I got probation, I could be an acting officer, where I would step up and execute the role of an officer. So you have people on this list that are already out there working in this role. everyone in the department acknowledges this person's competent to do this, and then they go take the test and they're told, oh, you're not capable of doing this job based on this test. You're talking about fairness, equity, and all these sorts of things. It's hard I'm trying to juggle that. Well, if I know this person can do the job, how is it that this test is saying they can't when they're already doing it? And then they could fail the test and still go back and continue to act as an officer. Well, that's a hard one for me I'm trying to, in my own mind, work through that. And then the next step is, my understanding is that these lists, we submit this like entry level. We submit our entry level public safety civil service list of eligible candidates to the fire department. And then they go through that list and they run additional tests, they do additional interviews, they evaluate those folks, and they don't go straight down the list. They pick and choose from all over that list of who they want to hire out of the however many people they're hiring.
Are you talking about entry level?
On entry level.
Oh, they go down the list.
They go down the list?
That's been the practice for the last, Chief Scoggins pretty much goes down the list for entry level. Sometimes they don't even interview anyone outside of the top 100.
That must be a new practice. When I interviewed Chief Scoggins was the chief, and I was number 270 something.
Right.
And I got a job off the
But
first
you remember,
list.
remember we had hired 4 classes off of those lists, and now we don't.
Yeah.
We only hired 2.
Okay.
So they didn't need to go, they didn't always pick and choose. He's pretty much gone straight down, but it could be different, yes.
Well, this even strengthens what I'm about to say then, is that whether or not this was the intent of public safety civil service list, that's how it's being used. It's being used to go straight down the list. It's my understanding, at least in my time, maybe there's been one time they've deviated from the list on the captain, lieutenant captain, or lieutenant chief promotional. Is that
We
sound
just,
right?
we just had a second example this year,
Yeah.
rather than last month or so. So there's been more than one time.
Is-
Um,
Can you think of more than 2 off the top of your head in the last 10 years?
I think there have been 2.
2. Okay.
But I want to say that what the fire chief chooses to do with the list is completely up to him. So we don't have any intentions on how the list is supposed to be used, because he has 100% discretion to hire who he wants off of that list. Our goal is to just prepare the list.
That is true, but when we're getting down to the thousands of a point, and that's the difference between someone's job or not, having to go back and spend another 500 to 1,000 hours in the next years to study, if that's how this is being used, then the next question is, well, if we're getting down to this granular minutia, and then we're saying, now we're being asked, you have no ability to have someone look at the scoring. I'm not saying, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, but what I'm saying is that to say that, no, this scoring, this is done by 3 people, so there's no ability, or there's no possibility this wasn't done correctly. How is that fair to the person who spent all this time and energy taking the test? How is that not fair to them to say, hey, I'd like at least someone to look at this to make sure there wasn't an error made, and not to give a new grading rubric, but to have someone else look at it and verify that they think that the decision that was made by folks that come from out of town. And this is my other part about the out of town folks. I think that's a great idea. The other part of that is every single fire department runs completely independently of each other, just like city governments, just like all these different municipalities have different rules for the way they do things. So to bring someone who's a captain in Kansas, give them 1 day of training, which encompasses all this different stuff. Well, they don't know our policies, they don't know our operating guidelines. They might have a general idea of that. They might have a general idea of what they do, but that doesn't necessarily, there's no way that you're going to learn everything you need to know about a department in 1 day. And so then now we're saying, we're going to bring these folks in from out of town. They're going to grade you. Someone may get a 9 and someone might get a 2, and then they're forced to come closer together. There could be wild variation there. And then they say, yep, these out of town graders, they looked at it and they decided that you missed the bar by 2 points, or you could miss the bar by 1,000th of a point, and you're not going to be eligible, and you need to redo all this 2 years from now. It just begs the question in my mind, does any other municipality have any way of looking at scoring? Do they always use out-of-town graders? Is this really, the question in my mind is there ways we can improve this process? And is this really what we want to do, is say that there's no way, there's no option of looking at having someone look at the score?
What you just mentioned, maybe I was thinking about that since you've been talking, is I think what we have here is looking at the rules on paper, what we have to defend the work that we're doing moving forward. I really think we're talking about 2 different things, which is the rules, but then the process. So the process that go along with the rules seems to me like it's not necessarily outside of our scope, but it's the department potentially, right? The rules, obviously the processes, they go hand in hand, but if they don't meet the mark and they have issues and they don't pass, for example, they don't get on the list, there's a 2-year waiting period. My question from an equity perspective is what's being done in that 2 years to make sure that the next time they do pass, or something that's concrete that goes along with the rules to help support it from an equity perspective. Most of the time, sometimes the rules, we can't flex on exactly what it says. We have some capabilities, but they have to go hand in hand. And I look at it from an equity perspective is, okay, what's happening within the process to be able to help those candidates that do have testing anxiety, that do have different communication styles, various learning styles, various comprehension levels. So next time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or however long, we went through this program that we have, some type of coaching program in partnership with the department to make sure that next time you're ready. I think we need to look at it from 2 different perspectives. The rule, yes, there needs to be something changed to be able to validate and support the work that we're doing. But on the other side, I feel like there is still opportunity to figure out what's happening to make sure that these candidates have support. Because for me, you know, you said outside resources, study groups, I feel like there's a gap. There's something missing to help support them to make sure they have what they need.
Yeah, I really do appreciate what you're saying here. And I think that I always try to remember that the commission really does need to stay in its own lane. The department is entirely responsible for training their own employees. If we were to try to train their employees outside of the testing context, I think they'd have something to say about it. And they have an entire really robust training unit. And so it is, you know, I'm not saying there isn't more thinking or discussion around this, but I do think that the department is responsible for training their employees up to be, and then the candidate has the opportunity and responsibility to train themselves as well. And I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to flag that we do have a public commenter on, I don't know what his schedule is, but I want to make sure, and he may have some perspective on these issues as well.
Maybe I could say one more. And that's the other piece of this that I realize this isn't exactly what the rule change is asking, but this just seems like a great opportunity for the commissioners and for the commission to talk about this whole process. But, you know, it says that the test is for the skills, knowledge, and ability to do the job. But entry level, we don't train, so we don't ask people questions about what hose do you use? What is this tool used for specific firefighting questions? Then you move up to this lieutenant test, and it's entirely on a job that you are not doing. And it's entirely on the candidate to put in there hours upon hours of studying that's uncompensated to try to study for a role that you've never even been trained on. And that kind of calls into question, like if what you need to do for this job is have leadership characteristics, you need to be able to learn, and you need to be able to make fast decisions, these sorts of things that we test for entry level. Why aren't we testing that as a lieutenant versus how much have you memorized of the POG? Can you run a fire already? Well, running a fire is the lieutenant's job, not the firefighter. And we're testing firefighters. So the idea that then we say from an equity standpoint, oh, well, it's on you to figure all this out on your own time. The department doesn't train you for lieutenant's test. The department puts all that on the person. Well, if you're a single parent, if you've taken care of other people, if you don't have 500 to 1,000 hours to give to study for a role that you're not doing yet, how is that equitable to everybody? How is this test? You know, that kind of calls into question the test itself. How is that equitable to candidates to have to learn how to do a job on their own time before they're even done it? Why don't we test the sort of the characteristics needed for this role, and then you go and train them to do the job, just like we do with entry-level firefighter?
There are definitely components of promotional exams that test leadership, test equitable views on being a manager. You know, I'm not building these exams. Adelaide, is there something you want to say about that? The knowledge skills.
I think I'm trying to make sure I am respecting Commissioner Nark's time, but for entry level, you get 16 weeks of paid training that starts from this is a hose, this is how you connect these two hoses, no matter how old you are and how many times you connect to the hose, everyone gets the exact same training. Excuse me. Yes, in drug school. So they get the exact same training. They have zero experience, or maybe they have a ton of experience, but they will get the same training for those 16 weeks paid, right? That is not how promotional training works, because there is no 16 weeks in depth. We're going to teach you all the things that you need to now know to be a lieutenant after you get hired as a lieutenant. Unfortunately, and I wish the system worked a little bit differently, the day that you are a lieutenant could be the day that you have to discipline someone, that you have to run a marina fire, that you have to be in charge of 3 overdoses. There is no timeout. Oh, do you not have skills to be a lieutenant? We'll wait for you. You must exhibit readiness on day 1. I believe so strongly that we could do more, but really it's the department's job. And we do not want to go out of our swim lane and into how are you preparing folks? How are you training folks? And there are people who don't like the training because it doesn't help them prepare for the test. Is the role of the department. If I could go in and change a bunch of things about the fire department, I'm sure I would have a list. If they could come in here and change a bunch of things about what we do, I'm sure they have a list as well. But we can't, because we're independent and we have 2 different jobs. My job is to create an eligibility list of people who are ready to be a lieutenant on the first day they are promoted. Their job is to make sure people know how to do the care, fight fires, do EMS, all the other things, inspections, all those things that they do, special events, everything and everything. I don't tell them how to do that.
Well, thank you. I think there's a definite understanding of the difference between commissioner's role and the department's role. It's just this role and needing to just ask these questions and make sure we have a thorough understanding of, are we comfortable to be able to do that, and we have all the information. So I appreciate everyone's input. Let's go ahead and move forward to get public comment from Commissioner Hunt.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for listening to my comments here. You guys have touched on a lot of things, and I was a commissioner for 20 plus years. And in fact, the captain's test where the person wrote 10 pages, I remember vividly. And it actually came to us in a way, are they going to throw out all 10 pages? Or there was some other stuff. And we came down to and it was very specific, write up to 3 pages or don't write more than 3 pages. It was something like that. And we came to the conclusion we'll just read the first 3 pages. He might have covered all the anchor points in the first 3 pages, and we just discarded the remaining 7 pages, which I thought was a very fair way to do it. Testing, civil service testing, is not an exact science. There's absolutely no way that you can make this perfect for everybody. And on this particular issue, when the lieutenants and sergeants take a promotional exam, they're given a packet. And the packet says, this is what the testing is going to be on. So they know what's on the list. They know what they have to study. And when you go in for your oral interview, which is that's what this is. Yes, you have 3 people from out of the area, which is kind of a fair way to do it, because if you had 3 people from the department, you have a better chance of having bias. Oh, I know this guy, or I met someone that knows this guy and he's not very good. So you're kind of taking that out because they don't know anybody. But there's anchor points. So, and it's usually, if I remember correctly, it's usually a fire scene incident, and they're given the information like you said before. Okay, how would you do this? And it's usually an HR. If you have to discipline or you hear something, that's the other way. But they have anchor points. So whether it be 4, 5, 6 anchor points, that's what the assessors are looking for. Did they cut these anchor points? And as soon as they cover an anchor point, they check it off. And that's kind of how their score is based on, is did they cover the anchor points? And those are all set up by Seattle Fire Department employees, subject matter experts, that's what they're looking for. This testing will never be exact. I think you're opening Pandora's box if you let candidates come back on an oral exam and say, we don't like our score, we want someone else to look at it. Well, you can't bring the 3 back. I mean, now you have monetary expenses, and it's kind of why they do it. In fact, by doing a videotape, they're able to do it much more efficiently. And as I said, the 3 people see all the candidates with the same question, and the other 3 people on the second scenarios do the same. It's about as fair as you can get it. If there is a bias, that bias would go through all the candidates. I mean, they would all be biased that way. It's like an NFL football game, and they're playing in Buffalo, and it's really snowy, and they're playing in Miami that doesn't play in the snow. But you know what? Both teams have to play in the snow. It's about as fair as you're going to get it. Nothing's ever going to be exact. Past practice, which the 20 plus years I was there, is that no, you can't appeal an oral score. Now, what I think you guys are trying to do, I don't think you're trying to change it, because past practice means a lot. I don't think you're trying to change it. It is just trying to tighten it up. So, okay, so these 2 candidates have appealed this, never been done before, but past practice would show that it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen very often, obviously, but you look at that. So by cleaning up the language, you're making sure it doesn't happen again. And like I said, testing is not exact. The whole role of the commission is to make it as fair as you can for everybody. You know, no nepotism. As for the lists, and when I came on, you would have 125 people on the sergeant's list, and they were going to hire 20. And it's very cyclical. During those 35 years I was on, there was times where there were 40 openings and 40 people. I mean, in fact, you know what? If you exhaust the list, and it has happened before, they'll usually the department will come to the commission and say, "Can we please have a midterm test to do another list, whether it be a captain's list or whatever?" But we have done that before, where we've had to do another promotional exam because we've exhausted the list. Another thing is, you know, the chief, let's say you publish a list, 40 candidates, and there's so many openings for lieutenant. You know, the chief doesn't even have to, if the chief said, one, they do have to go down the line, unless by contract, which the Seattle Police Officer Guild does have, is they used to be able to jump around, and the guild sued and won, and they have to go the top 3, and then if they make one of those top 3, now they add the 4th person, because it's the next one would be the new top 3. But the chief doesn't even have to, if the chief said, "I don't like anybody on this list," in 2 years, they don't even have to make anybody. It's their decision. They can let the list exhaust, and a new list would have to be, doesn't get done, but they actually have that power to do that. They don't have to hire off that list anybody, but what the Seattle Police Officers Guild said, and they got it into a contract form, is if you got passed, you had to have a meeting with the chief. You had the option of having a meeting with the chief. The chief would tell you why you got passed, and you have 3 months to correct that part of whatever you were not getting passed. And if you've done that in 3 months, then they have to go back and make you. But see, that's a contract, and it's not civil service. So contracts can write out civil service if they want, and a lot of cities do have that. The contract writes out a lot of the civil service board, and there isn't a lot for them to do. But they definitely have to go down the list. And hiring is cyclical. It's, you know, obviously the department had many, many problems getting people to apply and make officers over the last couple of years. It sounds like it's on the track to get a lot better. And I think a lot of it is the pay. And, you know, it's an attractive job. And obviously it's always been an attractive job for the fire department. And look at how many applicants you have. But, and there are, you know, it is to 1,000th of a point. I mean, these are wanted. You know, look at the fireboat pilot. Sometimes a position doesn't open for 20 years. Those are very sought after positions. And you have to study hard just in the case someone might retire and that you would get an option. But a lot of that, people take those tests for years. And I know there's, you have to have so many hours in that position or on the boat or whatever to even apply for it. But there's times where you're going to take a test and no, you're not going to get promoted. And as for training, we can't, it is a department thing. And and I can only speak for the police department, I would guess somewhat in the fire department, if there's people that have promoted to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, they'll hold, and they get paid, it's their own little business, but if they're good, they'll have people come to them and they'll teach a class on how to take a test. There's books on how to take a test. Like I said, the biggest thing is they give you the information. It's all in. If you just study that information, you should be, and I'm not saying everybody's a great studier and some people are better on written tests than oral tests, and that's why there's that 50-50 balance, but it is not an exact science. You're never going to make it perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Knight. Let's move forward. Do we need executive session or
I thought Tom,
Yeah.
you wanted to have it.
we want to do an executive session before we go over the meeting? Or do we need dates first?
Yeah, we can do that then.
Go ahead and look at the meeting. Thanks. That's on page 24 of your materials. Yeah. Okay, is there any discussion around these dates that we have listed?
I won't be here on
May 20th.
I know that, I think the April meeting has to go forward around that time, but I will not be here that week.
I think for me, any of these dates would work.
So we'll do the April 15th meeting because it is a police sergeant oral board possible protest. As long as we have a quorum on the 20th, let's move forward with that.
Right, or we could look at changing the date. I'd have to go look at my calendar.
Which one?
This one, May 20th.
Mayor Captain? Do we need to do more work? Should we just decide the February meeting and then vote on the rest of the meetings in February? I know Joe would tell us to. I think I can channel Joe and say, he'd say, vote on the whole schedule and then change them one at a time if you need to.
Yeah, then we can. Does the April 15th meeting allow us any wiggle room to change that?
That's fully.
Oh, that's May 20. I don't know how it's other. I'm happy to bring that information.
Okay.
I'm actually gonna be out of town February 9th.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're gonna have to find a new date for that too. Let's focus on that one then. Commissioner Applegate. So what I see as OPMA training, and that's not dependent on any particular day, right, Teresa? I mean, we'll just need Joe Levan to conduct that training. So I expect we could move that by a week. Maybe out to the 26th. Do you know what you want me to pull up your calendar, your work calendar?
Well, we've got the trial, if you will, on the 9th and 13th, and I was gonna be out of town those maybe 2 weeks a month. So
Okay.
the only time I would be able to do it would be the first week of February, but I'm also okay. If that doesn't work for anyone else, that's
So
fine.
that's a busy time.
Yeah.
The commission is going to be doing a lot of work in February. But, if there needs to be rulemaking in February, I think it would be, we're not gonna be able to, if the commission doesn't take action or doesn't firmly decide not to take action today, I think we do need a February meeting.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner Applegate, are there other days in February that we could talk about with your colleagues?
Can I propose that February 4th, the commissioners will be here for the hearing prep training? Could we have a meeting that day and then go into the prep training?
That would be it.
I don't anticipate that there's going to be much on the agenda.
That works for me. And I'm sorry to say, I think I need to put that Hill training back by about half an hour, but if we wanted to put a commission meeting at, noon, we could do that if it works for, these commissioners.
So do the training from 10 to 12 and then go into the meeting,
10:30 to 12:30 maybe, and then
10:30 to 12:30 and then go into the meeting.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, that works for me.
So the 4th at 10:30.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting. We could say 12:40 to just kind of give you
Sure.
a few minutes to get your mind into the meeting mode.
Okay,
Thank you for that.
So we're all set on the remaining days?
Like Andrea said, that Joe would probably say to just go ahead and approve all of the dates, and then we'll come back with the proposed dates for the April 15th and May 20 date change.
Okay, so I move to approve the 2026 proposed meeting dates. The few changes we have, instead of February 19th, we're gonna do February 4th for that commission meeting, and on May 20th, as long as we have a quorum, that will stay. I move to push that forward.
Second.
All right. That's it.
And was there an actual vote? Sorry. Second.
Yes.
Okay.
Did you vote? Yes. Vote.
there was two.
You seconded, then we gotta
Okay, then we have to do a vote. Do we vote to approve the 2026 proposed meeting dates?
do. Aye.
Aye.
Great job. Okay, let's move right along. Next item on the agenda, executive session. So,
Commissioner Mays, I think this might need just an update to the records, because from an older script, so.
I saw that.
Oh, you did see that?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Okay, so, as presiding officer, I'm announcing that we are now convening an executive session. The purpose of executive session is to discuss with legal, in reference to the rulemaking, for today. I expect executive session to take, how long do we need? 20 minutes?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. So we will, leave now and return at 11:53. We're reading that right? If the executive session is to be extended beyond that time, we will announce an extension and expected duration. Thank you.